Nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
(9:30 on Tuesday, the 16th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. The real life Alan Bates says that he will move heaven and earth to get compensation for the post office scandal. We'll be crossing live to him shortly as he talks for the first time.
Rwanda Bill rebellion. Two Tory deputy chairmen are set to rebel over the Rwanda Bill. Our own Lee Anderson is one of them.
This is not about us rebelling. It's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. You just need to beef it up a little bit, to close all those loopholes and make sure that people can't come over here and break into our country and use spurious claims to get off the hook.
Landslide win for Donald Trump. The former president was victorious at the Iowa caucuses overnight. How far can he go this year?
And the UK is a hostile target. That's how a Houthi senior military spokesman described US and UK-linked ships. Our security editor, Mark White, he's got more.
This follows a missile strike on a US-owned commercial ship off Yemen yesterday afternoon. There is now real concern about what the Houthi rebels will do next.
And unemployment unchanged. In the 3 months to November, the rate of UK unemployment remained at 4.2%.
And the children's word of the year has been released today. We're not happy about it.
Absolutely cracking show today, packed full of great stories that you don't want to miss. Let us know your talking points, gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 9:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak is gearing up to face a potential rebellion later as the Rwanda bill returns to the Commons. Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith are among more than 60 Tory MPs who are backing moves to toughen up the flagship migration policy. Rebelling MPs fear courts will be overwhelmed with appeals from asylum seekers earmarked to be deported, although the Prime Minister promises to allocate over 100 judges to these cases. Lee Anderson says the pair are about 90% happy with the bill, but it needs to be fine-tuned.
We just feel that there's a few areas in the bill that could be strengthened to make sure that it's watertight. And let's not forget, we're less than a year away from a general election now. And the last thing I want over there is a Labour lot coming in and repealing the Rwanda scheme and opening the borders to 100,000 odd illegal migrants a year, which they will do if they sign up to any EU sort of deal. So this is not about us rebelling. It's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. We just need to beef it up a little bit.
The bosses of the Post Office and Fujitsu will be questioned later by MPs. It includes wronged sub-postmaster Alan Bates, whose story inspired the hit TV show Mr Bates versus a Post Office. MPs on the committee will hear evidence from witnesses about the process for delivering fair and timely compensation for the victims. More than 700 people were convicted after flawed accounting software in the Horizon system made it appear money was missing from their branches. And there are further signs that job markets are cooling as wage growth slows. New figures from the Office for National Statistics found that the UK's average weekly wage growth eased to 6.6% in the 3 months to November. It's the lowest rate since the 3 months to January last year. It means pay packets grew faster than the rate of price rises. November also saw the lowest number of strikes in 18 months, with a slowdown in walkouts in the health sector. Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride says the government's plan is working. And parts of the UK face another day of cold temperatures as they dropped overnight to below freezing. The Met Office says a cold plunge of Arctic air has moved south across the whole country over the past few days, making it 5 to 6 degrees lower than usual for this time of year. The Met Office has issued yellow warnings for snow and ice, covering northern areas of England, parts of Wales and all of Scotland. It remains in place until midnight. It has warned of snow showers, power cuts and possible delays to trains and cancellations of air travel. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It is 9:34 Tuesday morning. So the real-life Alan Bates, the founder of Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, who's played by Toby Jones in Mr Bates versus the Post Office, will be talking for the first time this morning. We're going to be bringing you that live.
As with the former sub-postmistress Jo Hamilton, played by Monica Dolan in that TV drama Mr Bates versus the Post Office, she was accused of stealing £36,000 by the Post Office. She pleaded guilty in 2008 to false accounting, so lawyers told her otherwise. She could go to prison. Her conviction was eventually quashed in 2021. She'll be talking too.
That's right. We're going to be taking that live about 10 o'clock. These are two of the main protagonists, of course, from this big story, which has been all over the place in the last few weeks. We're going to be hearing what they have to say. I'm excited about this, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely, because, look, the drama has been extraordinary in putting this ongoing scandal that was first written about in a computer magazine in 2009. My own newspaper started writing about it in 2013. But the drama has put it on the national map. 9.5 million people watched the first one, and it was the articulacy of people like Alan Bates and Jo that has made it such a compelling drama, and it's caused the great scandal. It is the biggest miscarriage of justice in British legal history.
It makes me so cross, though, that it's taken a TV docudrama to put this front and centre. Is it a coincidence that it's election year? Probably not, that all of the MPs are there kind of getting involved. I'm glad there's a sense of justice. I want to see them all compensated. I'd quite like to see criminal proceedings brought against people who made these people's lives hell. And
we shouldn't forget also Fujitsu, who built this dodgy malfunctioning system. Some of their bosses, they're up before the public inquiry. That's a statutory inquiry being chaired by a former High Court judge. It's been going on for 3 years, for God's sake. They're up before that inquiry today too. So it's a big day for the Post Office scandal, and ultimately we want people to get their full compensation. How do you ever get your life back, Bev? You know, what about the people who went to prison? Should never have gone to prison. What about the people who had to sell their homes, their marriages are broken up, the people who've died already without getting justice, and the 4 people who took their own lives?
Absolutely. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. We will be checking them any minute now.
Now, big night in the American elections because the former President Donald Trump, one step closer to the rematch with Joe Biden. He scored an overwhelming win in the Iowa caucus.
This is time now for everybody, our country, to come together. We want to come together, whether it's Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative. It would be so nice if we could come together and straighten out.
Apologies for the audio in that clip. We're joined in the studio now by Chair of the Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. Good morning, Greg. Good morning. Can we just explain to our British audience, a caucus is basically a meeting, isn't it, of the party members, and what happens there?
It is ultimately a secret ballot, so you do actually cast your ballot privately after a few speeches, after some conversation. So it's much more of a community gathering rather than just an election where you can mail in your ballot or you can just go to the election center anytime during the day. You have to go at 7 o'clock Central Time, and you have a conversation. So it's a little bit more interactive, or a lot more interactive.
Right.
But importantly, no mail-in ballots. So it really forces people to come out and get a little more engaged in the process.
And do the members of the Republican Party, in the case last night, do they put nominations for people first, second and third choice, or do you just put one name down?
No, just one name down, ultimately. And so it's not too different than a primary, which we'll see next Tuesday, a week from today in New Hampshire. It's a different function, but ultimately you're voting for one person, and the outcome, as you know, wasn't that much of a surprise.
But the scale of it, Greg, enormous. He got more than 50% of the vote, more than all the other candidates combined, a 30% margin of victory over Ron DeSantis, who was not expected to come second. We all thought it was going to be Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador. She trailed into a poor third.
Yeah, I think that was I wouldn't say huge surprise, but the small surprise, or the small outcome that we didn't expect, was that Ron did rally and come in second. And as you know, I'm a supporter of Ron DeSantis, so I'm disappointed in what's happened over the last few months. But for a non-incumbent president, this is the biggest margin ever. I mean, bigger than Bob Dole in 1996. But sometimes you have to consider Trump to be a quasi-incumbent. So for an incumbent president to poll below 90 in his own party is a disaster. So in some ways, this was an overwhelming victory. There's no doubt about it. I can't dress it up. And 30 points and over 50%, very rare in Iowa. Usually you win the Iowa caucus in the 30s. But an incumbent president or quasi-incumbent should be polling much better. The only advantage he has is his opponent, or his likely opponent next year, is Joe Biden, who's also an incumbent president polling in the 60s.
Yeah.
So
no, I can't make my mind up what, Greg, is happening in Biden world. Are they thrilled that he's so far ahead, Trump, because they think they can beat him?
That's the argument that they've been making for a long time. They want Trump to be the nominee. That's why they've had the indictments and the mugshot, and this is helping Trump in the nomination process because he's the only one that Biden could beat. But that might backfire because now it looks, in the last few months, Trump is polling a little higher than Biden in most polls, or at least statistically tied. And so this is something that could really backfire on the Democrats.
Are they hoping
it's too close to call. I mean, either both candidates are flawed and both could lose to the other.
Do you think to some extent the Democrats are hoping that maybe these criminal prosecutions will have caught up with Trump by the time of the election and he won't even be able to stand?
And that's the theory, right? So they pump him up during the nomination process. And then once he's clearly the candidate, then they'll really turn on him, and they'll just run constant Jan 6 tapes, and they'll talk about democracy and all this other slander. But I think it could work, and that's their theory. And if you look at the polls, if you look at the fine print, 10% of Republicans won't vote for him if he has a conviction. So then you have a turnout problem, you have an enthusiasm problem. So the base is rallying around him. Republicans are really supporting him. Once Alvin Bragg, started with the indictments, Trump went from 45 to 60. That's 15 points of resentment. Most of it came from Ron DeSantis. But if there's a conviction, it might just make people hesitate. And that's all you need is 5 points.
But so many of them still think, don't they, that Biden is there illegally. They're ignoring the fact that the president cited effectively a riot at Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
They're still thinking somehow Biden cooked the books in the election, of which there's no evidence for that at all.
I mean, you could have an argument about election irregularities and Zuckerbucks and New York Post and, censorship. But the Stop the Steal election denial in 2022 was an electoral failure. So, Trump, as leader of the party, has not had good elections since 2016, barely won in 16. But 18, 20, and 22 were miserable failures. And most of the problems in 22 were from candidates that were leading with the election was stolen in 2020. It doesn't matter what your view is. It's just not an electoral winner.
Let's see what else happens. So Vivek Ramaswamy, he's now stepped aside. He's stepped out. He ended up on about 2-3%, I think, of the vote.
Yeah, I think maybe a little higher. It doesn't matter. You know, single digits, there's just no path to winning. Of course he endorsed Trump.
And he's supporting Trump.
No surprise. Even though Trump was kind of nasty to him over the weekend. But that's Trump's nature, you know. So it's and it works for him. So Vivek, you know, made a good, you know, who knows whether he was just doing this to get into good graces with the president, or maybe get the nod for vice president, or set himself up for 2028. But endorsing Trump was no surprise to anybody.
And what about Haley? She finished by saying this is now a two-person race. Is she right?
I don't think so. If she'd come in second, I would have to say yes. And I would think if Governor DeSantis had come in third, it would probably be wise to drop out and not waste any more money. But I think that because she came in third, she's very well positioned in New Hampshire. I give her a lot of credit for that. But New Hampshire is a different kind of state. It's more of a moderate Republican. It's a New England Republican up there. 50% of the voters in New Hampshire are independents. And you can cross over. Anybody can vote in the Republican primary. So it's really well set up for Nikki Haley, who's viewed as more of a traditional Republican.
She needs to win, doesn't she? Because she needs momentum.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if she loses in New Hampshire, it is over. Because no Republican, since World War II, no Republican has won Iowa and New Hampshire. It's interesting. You usually split those.
Right.
If he wins both, then
he's done. And where does this leave Ron DeSantis now? He said, you know, in spite of all they threw at us, we got our ticket punched out of Iowa. Where does he go from here?
There's really no path the way things are going right now. I think the reason that both Governor DeSantis and Nikki Haley, Governor Haley, will stick around is because Trump is vulnerable. Right? He's 78 years old. He's got 91 indictments on him. You just don't know. I can't predict it. But what I can say is, even though he's clearly got the path to winning the nomination, you know, there's no doubt about that. Anything can happen there. He's vulnerable, and I think it's probably worth hanging around to be the number two, just in case.
OK, brilliant. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, now Rishi Sunak's Rwanda scheme, the contentious one. This is the revised one, the beefed-up one. He says it is returns to the Commons today.
That's right. At least 60 Tory MPs have backed amendments to toughen the legislation to prevent European judges and human rights lawyers from blocking deportation flights.
Leading the rebels is former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who quit the cabinet over the Rwanda deal, and he told GB News he's considering, mind, not saying he will, voting against the bill.
Certainly going to support the amendments. They're in my name and those of Bill Cash, and there's now 60 Conservative MPs backing them. I hope the government will move and produce amendments that create a bill that will actually work. If they won't, then I've been clear that I'm not going to support the bill, and I'll actively consider voting against it, because all that matters is what works, and I'm not going to support a bill that doesn't work.
And joining the former Immigration Minister are two deputy chairmen of the party, Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith, and they announced they would vote for the rebel amendments.
Brendan and I both agree with pretty much 90% of this Rwanda bill. We just feel that there's a few areas in the bill that could be strengthened to make sure that it's watertight. And let's not forget, we're less than a year away from a general election now, and the last thing I want over there is a Labour lot coming in and repealing the Rwanda scheme and opening the borders to 100,000 odd illegal migrants a year, which they will do if they sign up to any EU sort of deal. So this is not about us rebelling. It's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. We just need to beef it up a little bit to close all those loopholes and make sure that people can't come over here and break into our country and use spurious claims to get off the hook.
This is incredibly important, which is why you see not just Lee and I, but our colleagues as well, who we all have opinions on this bill, because we want to make it work. We want to see those planes take off. We just want to beef it up a bit.
Well, we're joined now by the immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson to tell us his take on the bill. Ivan, morning. We've talked to you about this before. People like Brendan Clark-Smith and Lee Anderson, what they want to do is prevent any individual appeals. If the decision is to deport someone, that's it, no appeals. They've got a point, haven't they? Because lawyers like you, with all respect, are often, aren't you, bringing in appeals automatically to delay the entire process.
Well, let me put it, it's not possible. The process to put a general ban on every single individual case is not lawful, not so long as while we're in the Refugee Convention. You'll remember that the bill, what it says is that generally speaking, Rwanda's safe. That having been said, you've got to consider individual circumstances, compelling reasons, compassionate reasons for an individual. For example, someone could have a mental illness and they may well impact on their safety in Rwanda, despite the fact the government saying that it's safe. Now, the courts back in December didn't accept assurances by the Rwandan government that it was safe. They didn't accept assurances by the UK government that it was safe. And what the government's doing now is saying, right, we're going to declare it safe by an act of parliament. And in my view, Rwanda is not a safe country. Paul Kagame has a history of extrajudicial arbitration, extrajudicial killings, putting down his opponents, putting them in jail. That's the sort of person that we're dealing with. So by simply having an act of parliament to say, well, we say it's safe, there's going to be a conflict with the courts when it gets back to the courts.
But Ivan, what about the suggestion that lawyers are deliberately clogging up the system with appeals, multiple appeals, again and again, knowing that they're just dragging out the process? That's what these Tory MPs are trying to stop.
Well, put yourself in an asylum seeker's position. Someone's going to remove you to Rwanda. There's a law which allows you to make an application to Strasbourg to prevent it. What would you do, Andrew? You say, you know what, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to clog the system.
Well, I'd cut Strasbourg out. That's what I do.
The law as it stands gives them the right to do that. So if you want to change it, you've got to come out the convention. There's no other way. And I'm afraid that Robert Jenrick understands that it won't work. Now, the bill also has a caveat for ministers to override the decision, an interim injunction by Strasbourg. Even if they do that, I think you'll get challenges in the High Court for judicial review of that decision. Because if there's compelling reasons as to why the injunction was granted, it begs the question, why would a minister override it? So that also has to be lawful. It's not done. I don't think the courts will get through with this before the election.
Ivan, talk me through the real-world application of this. This clause, which basically means that that appeals could be made. Give me the certain circumstances in which those individuals could claim to not that they can't go through this process of non-refoulement that we heard. What kind of situation might they be able to claim under the way the bill is at the moment?
Well, I'll give you an example. So somebody could say they've got a mental illness and they have a doctor's letter, a report to say they cannot be sent to Rwanda. That will be compelling reasons to stop that person being removed. Now, what their argument would be that they won't feel safe because of their particular individual circumstances. Look, you cannot in law have a blanket ban. It's unlawful, it's inequitable, and it's not fair process.
That feels like a very low bar. If it's just a letter from a doctor to say, I've got a mental illness, that could be claimed by anybody, given I have such anxiety, I can't get on the aeroplane. I'm claustrophobic, I can't get on the aeroplane. Like, is the bar genuinely that low?
It's actually the opposite. The bar's very, very, very high.
Oh.
And the government's done that because they're going to have to get an expert to make an assessment and make those findings. If it's not genuine, no expert's going to do it. So the bar's actually quite high. It's the exact opposite.
OK. All right.
That's the lawyer, Ivan Sanson. Always a joy to talk to you, Ivan. Mark White, who's our Home and Security Editor here. I'm just puzzled about that. I know it's not your area, but if they've got a mental illness, why does it matter whether they're in Rwanda or in a hotel in Britain? What's the difference?
Well, I think they would say with regard to the mental illness that it's something that would be exacerbated by being sent to Rwanda, not necessarily, you know, getting on a flight because they can't fly. I think it's the trauma that they've suffered and then suddenly being sent to a third country like Rwanda, facing an uncertain
and
future.
therefore they could take that to its conclusion and say, I would be suicidal.
Sorry, I need a bit more convincing.
I do take exception to what Ivan's saying about the bar being very high.
Yeah,
the bar is very low.
Of course.
And there is a whole industry that is sprung up now around this whole asylum system with the people smugglers to begin with, the charities and the human rights groups who...
And the lawyers.
You know, they would say for a very good reason, are in there helping these people. Then it's the turn of the human rights lawyers and the supporters when they get to the UK mounting challenge. And we never used to see challenges like this in the past, but you see it now all the time. And anybody that thinks, regardless of what the outcome of the Rwanda bill is, if it goes through, if anybody thinks that it's not going to be subject of multiple legal challenges, I think is deluded, because it will.
And there'll be, and forgive me, but am I right to assume, Mark, that most of these challenges against the deportation system will be funded by legal aid, by the British taxpayer?
Yeah, well, absolutely. They will be entitled to legal aid, OK? The lawyers don't get as much legal aid as they used to, but it still gets funded because these people can't fund it for themselves, obviously. They don't have the means to do that, but they have the right under our law to that kind of protection, which means that we have to pay for the legal challenge that they will mount.
And when you put it like that, you can see why it plays such a big part in how people wish to vote in the next election and how important this bill is going to be this afternoon.
It's a big issue, and it's not just the sight of boats coming across. It's because it is affecting people in communities right across the country.
Absolutely.
There is barely a community in this nation where a hotel has not been turned over for asylum seekers.
OK, thank you, Mark. Lots more to come this morning. Any minute now, the real-life Alan Bates, who inspired the drama that he pushed for, the drama of the post office scandal. He's going to be talking for the very first time. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie Shuttleworth from the Met Office. It's going to be another very cold day out there today with snow and ice across many northern areas. There is a warning in force for this area of sleet and snow that's moving into more northwestern areas of the UK, covering much of southern Scotland into northern England as well as Northern Ireland, perhaps parts of North Wales later. In the south, though, it should stay largely dry across much of Wales, central England and southern England, with plenty of crisp winter sunshine across the east once again. And after the cold start this morning, it will warm up a little bit with light winds and plenty of sunshine in the south, but still staying very cold in the north into the evening. We'll then see a harsh frost developing once again through this evening. Plenty of clear skies across the south, but also that very cold wind across the north, allowing temperatures to dip down as low as -15 across parts of Scotland. The area of sleet and snow will push into more areas of northern England tonight, and that means there's a risk of ice tomorrow morning, so do take care if you're travelling. There'll be another very cold start to the day tomorrow morning, and we'll see plenty of snow showers pushing into Northern Ireland, many northern areas of Scotland, but further inland it should be a much drier and brighter day. In the south coast, though, you could see a dusting of snow, but there is some uncertainty in the details, so please keep up to date with them if you are in these areas. But for many of us, it should be a dry, crisp winter's day, but still feeling fairly chilly. That's all for now, but make sure you keep up to date, and I'll see you next time.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 16th of January. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
The real-life Alan Bates says he's going to move heaven and earth to get compensation for the post office scandal. We'll be crossing live as he talks for the first time.
And on the post office scandal, there are calls for the Archbishop of Canterbury, your favourite person, Andrew, Justin Welby, to resign over his links to the former post office boss, Paula Vanells.
He recommended her to be Bishop of London. For heaven's sake. Rwanda Bill Rebellion 2, not 1. Deputy Chairman set to rebel over the Rwanda Bill. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, has more.
It's a key 48 hours for Rishi Sunak. Will his Rwanda plan survive contact with his own right-wing Tory MPs? We'll find out.
And Britain's nastiest novelist. That's the title awarded to J.K. Rowling in a New Statesman article, which has been condemned, quite rightly too, as misogynistic. Let us know your thoughts this morning on all of our talking points, gbviews@gbnews.com.
And we were very vexed also about a story. We're going to tell you the favourite word of the year chosen by children 6 and 16 according to Oxford University Press. When we tell you, you will be holding your head in horror.
How brainwashed these poor kids are, this generation. No wonder they're all anxious and depressed, is it? First, though, your very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak is gearing up to face a potential rebellion later as the Rwanda bill returns to the Commons. Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith are among more than 60 Tory MPs who are backing moves to toughen up the flagship migration policy. Rebellion MPs fear courts will be overwhelmed with appeals from asylum seekers earmarked to be deported, although the Prime Minister promises to allocate over 100 judges to these cases. Lee Anderson says the bill needs to be fine-tuned.
We just feel that there's a few areas in the bill that could be strengthened to make sure that it's watertight. And let's not forget, we're less than a year away from a general election now. And the last thing I want over there is a Labour lot coming in and repealing the Rwanda scheme and opening the borders to 100,000 odd illegal migrants here, which they will do if they sign up to any EU sort of deal. So this is not about us rebelling. It's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. We just need to beef it up a little bit.
And Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth insists that the legislation will never pass the Commons under Rishi Sunak's leadership.
This is the third piece of legislation the government have brought forward to try and deal with this problem. And Rishi Sunak keeps saying he'll stop the boats. And every time he says that, he fails and he's exposed to being completely weak. I mean, he's got his own deputy chairman, one of your TV presenters, of course, actually defying him. And he's not doing anything about it. Completely weak. He's never going to grip this problem, or this country's never going to grip this problem while we have such a weak Prime Minister.
The bosses of the Post Office and Fujitsu will be questioned later by MPs. It includes wronged sub-postmaster Alan Bates, whose story inspired the hit TV show Mr Bates versus the Post Office. MPs on the committee will hear evidence from witnesses about the process for delivering fair and timely compensation for the victims. More than 700 people were convicted after flawed accounting software in the Horizon system made it appear money was missing from their branches. There are further signs that the jobs market is cooling as wage growth slows. New figures from the Office for National Statistics found that UK's average weekly wage growth eased to 6.6% in the 3 months to November. It's the lowest rate since the 3 months to January last year. It means pay packets grew faster than the rate of price rises. November also saw the lowest number of strikes in 18 months, with a slowdown in walkouts in the health sector. Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride says the government's plan is working.
What these figures show is that inflation now is under half of what it was a year ago, beating the target set by the Prime Minister. That's taking some pressure off people in terms of cost of living. We're seeing near record levels of employment, near record low levels of unemployment. We're seeing real wages increasing, of course, for the 5th month in a row now. And all this progress is because we've got a very clear plan of turning the economy around, giving us a brighter future.
US officials have condemned Iran after it fired missiles overnight on a building linked to Israeli intelligence in northern Iraq. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they struck what they claimed was a Mossad headquarters building in the city of Erbil. 4 people are reported to have been killed. Israel hasn't yet commented on the strike. The Iranian government said the strikes were in response to an Israeli attack in Syria last month. Donald Trump has secured a landslide victory in the first 2024 Republican presidential contest in Iowa caucuses last night. It's the first step for Republican voters choosing their candidate to take on the Democrats in November's election. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis finished well behind in second place, edging out former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Trump hailed his victory in a speech to supporters, saying he wants to straighten up the problems of the world.
This has been an incredible experience. The people have been, this is the 3rd time we've won, but this is the biggest win. They said, well, if you win by 12%, that's a big win. That's going to be very hard to do. Well, I think we've more than doubled that, I guess, tripled it maybe. They want our country to come back. They want America, they want us to be great again. It's a very simple, MAGA, make America great again.
And parts of the UK face another day of cold temperatures after overnight lows dropped below freezing. The Met Office says a cold plunge of Arctic air has moved south across the whole country over the past few days, making it 5 to 6 degrees lower than usual for this time of year. The Met Office has issued yellow warnings for snow and ice covering northern areas of England, parts of Wales and all of Scotland. It remains in place until midnight. It has warned of snow showers, power cuts and possible delays to trains and air travel. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning, 10:06. Thank you for joining us. Let's see what you've been saying at home. John has said, here we have Donald Trump could come back as the US president who loves Britain and would give us a trade deal. But how on earth?
Last time.
No, he didn't, did he?
No.
I kind of forget that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had... How long have we had this Biden for? It's 2023. Yes, so there was time.
There was time.
There was not enough... No work was done on it of any significance.
But he says, how are we going to do that with the Labour government, where you've got the likes of Keir Starmer and David Lammy and Yvette Cooper, where there'll be clips of them criticising Donald Trump. I dread to think what the relationship between America and Britain is going to be like with the Labour government. Really good point, John.
Yeah, I pointed out in the Mail last week, or a couple of weeks ago in my column, when Cameron was Prime Minister, there was an edict to the Foreign Office to have nothing to do with Donald Trump's candidacy for the American, because they wanted to support Hillary Clinton. This bloke's now our Foreign Secretary. He got it wrong on foreign policy all the time.
Absolutely. Well, Gary says the Tory rebels are paper tigers. This is about the Rwanda bill later today, as they've demonstrated. Previously, they make a lot of noise and threats, but when it comes to the crunch, they just cower away. That's your suspicion, isn't it?
Well, look, we heard the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick. I'm minded not to support the bill. Is he going to vote against it? I will lay money on it. He will not. And I lay money the government will get this through. The third reading, that means the whole thing then goes to the House of Lords, will go through tomorrow. I'm laying money on it.
And Rob has said, I'm not religious, but God help us if Trump gets back into power. We would then have him, Putin, the crazy rocket man in North Korea, the Chinese, Iran, World War III, here we come. Frightening. I disagree, Rob. We had a period of sustained peace under Donald Trump.
There were no wars.
There were no wars. I completely shared that concern before Donald Trump became elected, because I just thought, but it was almost like the crazies across the world, the crazy dictators looked at Trump and thought, he's more unpredictable than us.
We shouldn't forget either, he had a face-to-face meeting with the lunatic in North Korea.
That's right, with Kim Jong-un, yeah.
I mean, and
obviously Kim Jong-un is not here to defend himself.
No, I'm going to say it again, just
I'm sure you're not a crazy
lunatic who runs North Korea.
In the interest of balance, the crazy dictator would assert that he's not a crazy dictator. No. And we're going to see, as we say, any minute now, we're going to be going to the post office scandal, Mr. Bates, Joe Hamilton, the two main characters from that drama. The real people, not the actors, are going to be talking. We're going to be going to them live.
I bumped into Joe Hamilton. She's just... she had to repay £36,000. She pleaded guilty to false accounting to avoid a prison sentence, because that's what a lawyer said. You saw, it could be your mum.
Yeah, she's the character in the drama with the blonde curly hair who is trying to get the books to balance, and she says, I can't do computers, I don't really understand how it works.
She is still bewildered how her life was turned upside down.
Not surprised.
She did nothing wrong. Kept saying, I haven't done anything wrong. I've not stolen any money. It wasn't me, Gov. And yet she was like many who took a criminal record to try and avert the threat of prison. Shocking.
Charlie has got in touch on gbviews@gbnews.com. He says it's quite right that all the victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal should be compensated, as Bev suggested. It's absolutely... They are being compensated. It wasn't just my suggestion, I think.
Slowly.
But slowly, and frankly, in my opinion, not sufficient amounts. It's absolutely atrocious, despicable what's happened 16 years ago to these employees of the Post Office. The people who employed them should be ashamed of what's happened. Fujitsu should be absolutely crucified for what it did. Again, it's simply appalling what has happened to these British citizens who are fundamental to Britain's everyday life.
I just remind you, one of the bosses of Fujitsu, he is before the public inquiry, which is a statutory inquiry being chaired by a former High Court judge in the public. So that public inquiry is ongoing, and he's before that inquiry today. Now, we're going to talk now to the Conservative MP for North Norfolk, Duncan Baker, who's unusual in being a Tory MP, and yet he is a former sub-postmaster. His family ran a business which had not one but two sub-post offices, and he joins us now. Duncan, morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. Yeah, I've often been described as unusual.
I think there aren't many MPs who ran a local post office, and you worked behind the counter, I think, when you were a child in your dad's post office, didn't you?
Well, that's slightly gilding the lily, and I'll be honest enough to say that. No, I was a finance director of the CT Baker Group, which was my step-family's business. Very well known in North Norfolk, Holt, where the Royal shop. We owned a 13,000 square foot supermarket, but we also had one in Aylsham. And in 2015, would you ever believe that our post office won Post Office of the Year at the Retail Oscars? And I met Paula Venables the following year, which I had known what I know now.
Yeah.
So yes, I ran two post offices and a post office van back from 2014 to 2019.
When did you become aware of this scandal, Duncan? Because that's what our viewers often get in touch with and say, surely MPs knew. Why did it have to take this drama to bring it front and centre of everyone's attention?
I think really when it became mainstream, and that was pretty much into the summer of 2020 when Boris Johnson ordered the public inquiry, which then got upgraded to a statutory inquiry. And to be absolutely honest with you, prior to that, I knew very little about it. I can still remember one of my very first surgery appointments, which I don't forget, when we were all elected in 2019, which was Christmas time, and don't forget we were then into a pandemic by about February, March time. With those very, very early weeks, having a postmaster come and see me, who was one of the groups in the 555, who told me all about what had happened, and that brought back huge memories because, for me, in twofold. A, I can still remember my stepfather, who is passed away just before I was elected, coming into my office, going bananas about why the tills were down and why they didn't balance, and I'd said, look, the post office. These people, they're all ladies. They're fantastic ladies. They're as honest as the day is long. They've hunted, searched the high and low in the post office and can't find the difference. It makes me think now, was Horizon still not working properly, as late as sort of 2016, 2017? But it was really mainstream back in that summer of 2020. And ever since then, I've campaigned endlessly because it has a personal meaning to me.
You've got a long history with the post office, Duncan. How... I mean, the reputation of the post office is in the gutter, frankly, because a lot of people think somebody has lied or misled or dissembled, because all those postmasters and postmistresses, did it not occur to anybody within the post office that some of them must be telling the truth, or even the majority, and yet we know they were allowed to go to court on the basis that the courts were being told the only people who could access the Horizon IT system were the postmasters and postmistresses, when that was, frankly, simply an out-and-out lie.
I can remember it was the second episode, wasn't it, of the Mr. Bates episode, just over after the New Year, when this post office union member was led into the sort of Death Star type chamber inside Fujitsu, where they were told, oh yes, we can happily go into Horizon and alter the figures, and the sub postmaster will never know we were ever in there. I mean, that was absolutely shocking and staggering, and it just blows wide open that, of course, how much was that happening on an industrial scale of Fujitsu employees correcting numbers from behind the scenes. And of course, for me, I've raised in Parliament 6 times, look at the record, when are we going to look and hold Fujitsu accountable for their actions? When are we going to get them to compensate? They're a multi-billion pound organisation. They need to be coughing up as well and contributing to this. And of course, always the answer at the dispatch box was, wait until the inquiry has run its course. Well, that now, of course, is nonsense, because we've seen Metropolitan Police start to say that we are investigating something. We don't know what. Is it individuals? Is it the corporate post office? Is it Fujitsu? And of course, Kevin Hollenrake, who is a decent man, really good minister, has now, made quite clear with all his thoughts at the dispatch box. So, for many of us who've been on about this for many years, it's been last week was a very positive week, but of course it brings up huge, painful memories for so many of those, sub postmasters, men and women who lost absolutely everything.
Duncan, when you consider that, and you know that how this programme has really lit a fuse, hasn't it, in the country, the outrage that people feel that people lost their homes, their marriages, in some cases, God help us, their lives, the idea that perhaps there will not be a criminal sanction against some of the people involved in what clearly was a corporate cover-up, there has to be some form of, at least proper, full-scale criminal investigation.
I think so. I think it's the only way we will get proper closure. Though, clearly you have to have an investigation. And so the investigation will highlight which executives in the post office, which executives in Fujitsu, which, potentially senior managers as well, knew what was going on and covered information up. We already know. I mean, last week on GBNews, I was having an interview, and there was a gentleman, I think, from a company called, First Sight, which was ordered to investigate these shortfalls within the post office. He said that after presenting the findings to the post office board, they basically terminated his contract. He didn't do any more work for the post office. Look, there is no smoke without fire, as far as I'm concerned in life. Something and somebody knows what went on. And there was industrial scale covering up, I believe, by this. I think that's pretty obvious from just everything that has come to light. But as I said in Parliament the other day, one of the very, very easy things I asked was, we still do not know how much money was taken unlawfully from the thousands of postmasters who were asked to cough up money. Now, even the most basic accountant can work out that if the average person, was done for 10, 20, 30,000, we know some people were asked to pay £70,000, and there were thousands of them. This number that the post office took, which went into their accounts, goodness knows where it disappeared, it could be up to 100 million that they took off different people. I've asked for the basic, go back to the post office, find that number, and what is it? I think every single time we start to turn over another stone in this saga, we find more uncomfortable truth. So, yeah, I'm fully behind having a criminal investigation into this, because I do believe we will find some absolutely appalling behaviour.
Absolutely. We've just been watching live scenes of the meeting in Westminster. You could see in the background on the second row, actually, that Jo Hamilton, who is the character in the drama. She's played by Monica Dolan, one of the key figures in this. And we're going to go live to this when Mr. Bates himself is giving evidence this morning. Do you think you would like to see him awarded in some way, Duncan? I mean, a lot of people are calling for Sir Bates.
Yeah, take off Ed Davies and give it to Sir Bates.
Very good. Do you really mean that?
Well, look, I mean, I've been reading some of the articles that you've been writing, Andrew. I think they're very, very good. I think there are serious questions to be asked about a number of ministers who are culpable in this whole situation. To just blindly follow what they were told by civil servants or even...
I think you're right. I think we've got... we lost Duncan. I think we might have frozen. We've lost Duncan Baker.
Duncan Baker, MP for North, Tory MP for North Norfolk, who was a sub-postmaster. He ran his family ran 2 post offices, and he says there should be a criminal prosecution. But I like that idea. Strip the knighthood off of Ed Davey, the Lib Dem leader, who was post office minister in 2010 and 2012, said, no purpose in meeting you, Mr Bates. Why would I? Post office say everything's fine, and give it to Alan Bates.
Yeah, quite right. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, at least 60 Tory MPs have backed amendments to toughen the Rwanda bill legislation, which is going to be debated this afternoon.
Well, our political editor, Chris Hope, can guide us through this minefield, which is what Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is trying to negotiate. Chris, you've got on the one hand Tory MPs like Mark Francois, who's regularly on this programme, and Lee Anderson, who we spoke to earlier, who's, of course, of this parish, who want it to be tougher. They want to keep the European judges' noses firmly out of this. They want to limit the right of appeal. And then you've got MPs on the other side, people like Robert Buckland, a former Lord Chancellor, who are alarmed at the idea we might keep the European judges out of the process because they feel we would be then in breach of our international conventions. How does Rishi Sunak marry these two warring sides?
Well, Andrew, that's very well summarised. This is politics where there's no easy answers. The PM is walking down a very narrow ledge here between the right of the party, which wants him to firm up, make tougher, make more unlikely that lawyers can frustrate attempts to send illegally arrived migrants to Rwanda, deport them, against the left of the party, which will not allow any, or will say it won't allow any amendments to this bill. Labour, of course, will vote against it. And we've got Rwanda, of course, the end country, which says if you go any further than this, you risk collapsing the treaty signed a few months ago by James Cleverly out there, the Memorandum of Understanding, if you remember that, before Christmas. So it's a very, very delicate balance he's got. Of course, for GB News yesterday, the PM told our viewers that he will be willing to overrule so-called pajama injunctions, Section 39 orders, when the European Court of Human Rights tries to prevent flights taking off. He said he will do it. But for the right of the party, nothing in writing, and that's the challenge he's got. We've got Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith, of course, last night on GB News' Patrick Christie's show, telling the PM in terms they're not rebelling, but they want to beef up this legislation. They're both in red wall seats. They know the importance of making this work for the government. The PM himself told us at GB News he gets the importance of it, But here we have MPs on the right of the party, red wallers, trying to make it work for him. While I've been on, I've receiving a WhatsApp message from a rebel source close to the so-called five families, Andrew and Bev. That this is the groups who are looking at trying to rebel against the government today and tomorrow. They're saying that urgent talks continue. It would be sad, unfortunate and politically damaging for the government to pursue a strategy that sees them lose the support of so many colleagues on such an important issue, especially in the light of some dreadful polling overnight and yesterday from YouGov in the Daily Telegraph.
OK, all right, thank you, Chris. Chris Hope there down in our Westminster studio. Still to come, we are waiting for the real-life Alan Bates to talk about the post office scandal. We'll bring you that as it happens. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What's the time? The time is 10:25 with Britain's News when GB News Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner.
So the rate of unemployment in the UK has remained unchanged at 4.2%, while wage growth has continued to slow to 6.6%.
Well, joins in the studio is our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan. Before we crunch into those figures, Liam, that huge poll we saw yesterday was big rumpus about who...
I love it when he asks me
it.
things that...
You didn't know was coming.
It's telly, I love it. Go on.
But Chuck, buried in the poll, I think, was a suggestion that the Tories on the economy have caught up a bit with Labour in terms of there is more trusted on the economy or as trusted on the economy, whereas a few months ago, they were way behind Labour. So that would have been about the only crumb of comfort in that poll.
A big day for American politics with Trump storming the Iowa caucuses. Where am I going with this?
Yeah.
And, of course, it was... Bill Clinton's former chief advisor, James Carville, who coined the phrase, it's the economy stupid,
right.
because it is the economy stupid. Yeah, I love politics, you love politics, but you and I both know the economy drives politics, drives voting, and as the economy gets better, the incumbent government will almost always benefit. And that's why Sunak has decided to go long, because he's hoping the economy gets better as inflation comes down, hopefully interest rate comes down, and then the Tories get the benefit of that. But everyone has a plan until you get a smack in the mouth, as Mike Tyson once said, the great ferocious boxer. And Rishi Sunak's plan of going long, because the economy will improve this year to generate a feel-good factor, may be derailed by geopolitics, by high oil prices, by the boats. So this is the backdrop. This is the backdrop, because if you'd have asked me 2 months ago, of course interest rates are going to come down in 2024, of course inflation's going to come down. Now we don't know, because there may be energy price spikes.
You mean because it's kicking it off in the Red Sea?
Or at the Red Sea, and in particular the Persian Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz, which is where 25% of the world's oil goes through.
You've been banging on about the Straits of Hormuz for months.
I have indeed, and you all laughed at me, don't worry.
No, I never laugh at you.
We shouldn't forget there's no let-up in Ukraine and Russia.
That's just on the back burner. And yet it was Ukraine and Russia which helped drive inflation to a 40-year high in the first place, right? Up 11%. But that was late 2022. Inflation topped 11% in this country. It's now, on the latest data, the November data, 3.9%. It's come right the way down. It's still almost double the Bank of England's 2% target. But because inflation's been coming down so quickly, the mortgage companies, the banks have decided that the next move in interest rates is down from 5.25% from the Bank of England when that eventually happens, and then interest rates will fall steadily. But we don't know if that's going to happen. That's why today's wage data is so important. Right. As Bev said, in the 3 months to November, wages were up by 6.6%. That's down from 7.3% during the 3-month period. Yeah, real wage increases. Good for GB News viewers and listeners. Good for employees everywhere. Finally, we're getting some real wage increases. But the Bank of England may decide, with this possibility of an oil price spike, with wage data still high, they may decide that they're not going to lower interest rates for some time yet.
What is going on with this unemployment rate? Because we've got millions of people who could be working, of working age, who aren't working. Why are they not going and getting some of these jobs?
Because, in general, a long-term trend, and particularly during COVID, we've signed a lot of people off sick, Bev. There are 3 or 4 million people who are part of the workforce, who are economically active and signed off sick. It's not difficult to get a doctor's note, as lots of people will tell you. But look, it's still the case that unemployment is low. The economy is still not in an early 80s or even an early 90s situation. Remember when we were kids, unemployment 10% plus. UB40's song, I'm a 1 in 10. We're nowhere near that. It's more like 3-4%. So that's good for the Tories and good for if Labour win for them as well. But we do still have an inflation problem in this country, and that's why expectations of 1, 2, maybe 3 interest rate cuts by the Bank of England before an October-November election may be knocked off course. As I said, Rishi Sunak had a plan. His plan may not come to fruition.
The other thing, if you go back in history, Liam, to the 97 election, in the run-up to that election, the economy was entering into a golden period. Ken Clarke, the Chancellor, handed over
the golden inheritance of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown.
Because the sense was that people felt they could take the risk because the economy was strong, was doing well. We can try that now.
The national debt was 30% of GDP, right? It's now 98%, over 100% on international definitions. We slightly tweak the numbers in this country. We're good at that to make it look good. It is a very different situation. You know, you and I were political correspondents. We worked together back in the day in those early Blair days, and it was really, there was a sense that the economy was on the up after all the traumas of the 80s and the early 90s. And guess what? Britain was a world-class economy back then. But you know what? I don't like talking the UK down. Good. I still have huge faith in British entrepreneurial ability, and so does the rest of the world. That's why we still attract more inward investment than any other EU country by miles, despite Brexit.
Yeah.
And it strikes me that it's clear Britain is growing faster than the Eurozone. It's not growing nearly as fast as it should. We still do have a productivity problem, and maybe we've still got an inflation problem. But the economy is by no means a basket case, and it might yet recover fast and surprise us all on the upside, as they say. But a lot of it depends now, not on the economy, stupid, but when we look at the Red Sea, geopolitics, stupid.
What was it Macmillan said about the most difficult part of government? Events, my dear.
Events, dear boy.
Dear boy.
Maybe in your version it's my dear Andrew. We're inclusive here on GB News.
Right, Liam, thank you.
Say things like that. I am to you.
Very good to see you. OK, still to come.
She's shooing us off now.
I know, we've got to move on, you two, honestly, dear boys. Yeah. Still to come. We said yesterday, didn't we, about the fact that Queen Elizabeth was apparently furious when Harry and Meghan said they were going to call their daughter...
Well, it was claiming that she'd
Lilibet.
given it her blessing. That's what she was cross about.
That's right. We're going to be talking about that because this story has evolved a little. We've had a little more glimpse into why. All that and more after your morning's news with Sophia Wensler.
Thank you, Bev. It's 10:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Rishi Sunak is gearing up to face a potential rebellion later as a Rwanda bill returns to the Commons. Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith are among more than 60 Tory MPs who are backing moves to toughen up the flagship migration policy. Rebelling MPs fear courts will be overwhelmed with appeals from asylum seekers earmarked to be deported, although the Prime Minister promises to allocate over 100 judges to these cases. Lee Anderson says the bill needs to be fine-tuned.
We just feel that there's a few areas in the bill that could be strengthened to make sure that it's watertight. And let's not forget, we're less than a year away from a general election now. And the last thing I want over there is a Labour lot coming in and repealing the Rwanda scheme and opening the borders to 100,000 odd illegal migrants a year, which they will do if they sign up to any EU sort of deal. So this is not about us rebelling. It's about us saying, you know what, the bill, most of it is satisfactory. We just need to beef it up a little bit.
Post Office and Fujitsu bosses are being questioned by MPs. The Business and Trade Committee has assembled to look at the appeal processes in place to help overturn wrongful convictions in the Post Office scandal, as well as the process for delivering fair and timely compensation for the victims. Wrongly accused sub-postmaster Alan Bates will represent more than 700 victims who were convicted by giving evidence on the impact the scandal has made on their lives. There are further signs that the jobs market is cooling as wages growth has slowed. New figures from the Office for National Statistics found that the UK's average weekly wage growth eased to 6.6% in the 3 months to November. It's the lowest rate since January last year. It means pay packets grew faster than the rate of price rises. And parts of the UK face another day of cold temperatures after overnight lows dropped below freezing. The Met Office says a cold plunge of Arctic air has moved south across the whole country over the past few days, making it 5 to 6 degrees lower than usual for this time of year. It's issued yellow warnings for snow and ice, covering northern areas of England, parts of Wales and all of Scotland, which remains in place until midnight. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website at gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2642 and €1.1611. The price of gold is £1,614.96 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,550 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Still to come this morning, we are on Alan Bates' watch. Possibly one day, Sir Alan Bates, of course, the real-life former postmaster, is going to be speaking out for the first time any moment now.
This is Britain's Newsroom, GB News. Stay with us.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Sorry about that. 10:39.
You always do.
I get the time wrong.
I think he wants to get out of here quickly, so he goes.
Not now, Nigel Nelson's here and Tonya, because we love them. It's 10:39. Britain's News and GB News. Andrew Pearson.
So we are delighted, as Andrew says, to be joined by our guests this morning, Nigel and Tonya. But let's go first to a hotel in Newquay, which has launched a groundbreaking scheme where anyone who is out and about at night and feeling vulnerable could be directed to a safe space where they can seek refuge and call for help.
Scheme's being rolled out across the whole of Newquay, very nice part of the world, of course, with the aim of turning it into the country's first safe space town. Our South of West England reporter, Jeff Moody, went to find out more.
Meet Oleg Ignatiev, owner of the Newquay Beach Hotel, creator of the town's fledgling Safe Space initiative.
Because we're open 24/7, the idea was that if anybody is feeling threatened, they can pop in here and we could create a safe space. We'll call the authorities if required. We'll isolate them if required.
The scheme was created after a worrying spate of incidents in the town. Girls followed home at night, drunkenness, low-level attacks. Within weeks of opening up his hotel as a safe space, Oleg decided to roll the scheme out over the whole town. QR codes will be displayed on lampposts, in public toilets, in every public space.
When you scan the QR code, we're creating a map which will show all the safe spaces. It will show the nearest one to you, the one that's open, and obviously you can link to your maps and you can get directions there immediately, or you can call the safe space as well.
Once in a safe space, whether it be a bar, a hotel or a cab office, specially trained staff can help to isolate the vulnerable, offer assistance and call the police if need be. The community is getting behind the project. Next step to enlist as many other businesses as possible who can open their doors at night to create a network of safe spaces. Mark Warren is Newquay's Business Improvement District Manager.
We're looking at we're about to start recruiting businesses that want to get involved. But it is a simple scheme. But if I'm honest, it's just about being compassionate and caring for the community. So we've got amazing businesses that would welcome people to come in if they feel in need. And we're talking about that vulnerable moment when you're in a town centre, or you're walking through and you feel a little bit awkward. Maybe you need to make a phone call to mum to pick you up, or more importantly, maybe we need to speak to the police. But it's just having somewhere and somebody that would care.
Last year, Newquay hit the headlines after a hotel in the town opened its doors to asylum seekers, leaving the community divided, angry, and with a feeling that things weren't as safe as they were before. Now the council is on board, as are the police. The hope is enough businesses sign up so there are safe spaces throughout the town, and eventually to create a business model that can be rolled out across other towns and cities across the UK. Jeff Moody, GB News.
I love that. I didn't know about that. I hadn't seen that until it just went out there now. Am I missing something, Nigel? Isn't that just a good news story of people wanting to help each other?
It's just good.
Right, that's it. Move on. What's the next one?
I mean, it's a bit like they're the kind of things that David Cameron's Big Society were trying to do.
Which went away after it lasted a week.
Yeah, I mean, Big Society disappeared because he could never articulate quite what it meant. No. But it was a good idea. The idea was that by helping others, you help yourself. Was broadly, the sort of the message behind it. But this was the kind of thing that he wanted people to do, to actually get together as a community, to help people who were vulnerable or less well off in that community. And this kind of thing, I don't know how you can knock it. The fact everyone is pitching in.
Tanya's got an angle. Go on, Tanya.
Well, the reason is, it was said in that report there that, this all happened because of it really started happening because of the migrant hotel that's there, and young girls don't feel safe walking home anymore. There's a lot of crossover stories going on at the moment in Britain. People need to start adding up those dots, joining the dots. So it is a good news story. It's lovely that the community is coming together, wanting to help people, but it's sad that they have to, and it is in the light of girls not feeling safe going home, having to go in and turn in somewhere because they've got people following them and they feel threatened.
I think, that was raised there, that culture change maybe so quickly in that area has obviously perhaps had an impact on this. I mean, we were saying when that was on, why can't they just go into any normal hotel at that time of the night or bar? But of course, well, I guess you would have to go in and then explain, and you might feel a bit silly, and I think...
You have to be welcome.
I think I'm being followed, but I don't know...
I suppose some hotels would say, not here, go.
Yeah, and so if you're signed up to the scheme, that automatically you would be welcome when you arrive there.
They would know why you'd gone in. It removes that need for a difficult conversation and gives you that time and space to feel safe. I think, the more... I need to really process this and what this means. I'm with you, Tanya. We shouldn't have a need for this.
No,
I wish we didn't need to have this, but as the mother of 3 teens, and 2 of which are girls, I love the idea that this could be in all cities, particularly on a night out.
It's girls or boys, actually.
Yeah, very much so.
Girls or boys.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad this is happening, but why has it had to happen now? And we need to look at what we're doing to our society in Britain. We really do.
Yeah. Right, moving on. So, big day today for Rishi Sunak. It's the Rwanda plan, this crunch vote. Is it going to make any difference, Nigel? Is it, in the end, are the party just going to back him and vote it through?
I think they will back him.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it'll go through. Today the amendments probably won't go through. Tomorrow is the big day because that is the vote on third reading, which is the entire bill.
Yeah.
If the rebels vote it down, no Rwanda, that's the end of it.
But that could be the end of his premiership.
And it will also bring down the government.
Yeah, because it's a flagship party.
Yeah.
programme. He said stop the boats. This is his only way he thinks he can stop the boats.
That's right. I think he's wrong, by the way, because I don't believe in Rwanda in the first place as being effective. But however, from a political point of view, the one thing he could do is if tomorrow it looks like he might lose, I don't think he will, but if it does look like it, he can make it a confidence vote. Tory MPs would then all have to come on side and support him. It would actually, his authority would be weakened by doing it that way, but it is a possibility.
But, you know, the thing is, you know, they're deaf. The government are deaf to what the people want. Even it's over 50% of Rishi's own constituency, Richmond in Yorkshire, believe that illegal immigrants should be removed without the right of appeal.
Yes.
A new poll has just been done that of 516 constituencies in England and Wales out of the 575 that we have believe that illegal immigrants should be removed without right of appeal. The British people are speaking. We voted you in. Do as we say. Stop this mamby-pambying. You know, what Nigel wants is not what the British people want, because these polls are showing that the British people are sick.
Can I just say, we talked to Ivan Sampson earlier, immigration lawyer.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of human rights stuff, and a lot of it's, of course, on legal aid. And he said it's a very high bar for the appeal to happen. I don't believe him. He says they can go to the doctor and say, my mental health, I can't get on the plane, I won't be safe. I don't think it is a high bar. And I think the appeal system is being abused and exploited by the industry that's called the human rights lot.
Well, I mean...
Which is what these Tory MPs want to stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very well, but there is the law here, and the issue all the way through is that Rishi Sunak believes that he's gone as far as he can within the bounds of international law. I'm not sure he's right. The idea about these Rule 39 pyjama injunctions that stop the flights taking off at the last minute, if he ignores it, I think he already is in breach of international law, but that's what he says he will do.
Good.
Well, yeah, but...
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the idea of breaking the law is the bit that I find difficult, so...
France did it in December with they were deporting somebody. They ignored the European Court. France did in December.
Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting that France is right on that basis.
It happens.
Yeah, it does happen. And in fairness, Rishi Sunak says that he will do that. He won't allow these last-minute injunctions to stop a flight taking off. So I get that. The answer is, if these people want the bill, and that's Lee Anderson and Brendan Clark-Smith who are trying to actually back amendments, if they want the bill, they ought to keep it where it is at the moment, let the amendments go through today, get them voted down, vote for third reading tomorrow. That's the right political thing to do. Personally, I'd vote against the whole bill anyway, because Rwanda is unlikely to work.
The reality is unless we come out of the ECHR and rule ourselves, all of this is going to go on forever, costing us millions and billions of pounds. And I am sick of my hard-earned taxes going to human rights lawyers. It's a big buck business.
It is.
We've had enough of it.
And it's going to cost the Conservatives the election.
It is.
And I still say, and I know I'm alone in saying this, but I still think Rishi Sunak should go before the next election. If you look at those figures yesterday in the Telegraph,
who would you have take over?
It's a busted flush anyway. That's not my decision to make. They must have somebody that would be more popular with the public, somebody that is a Conservative. If it's a busted flush, if they're done anyway, according to that poll, then throw everything at it. Just get rid of him and put someone else in there.
The most popular would be Boris, but he hasn't got a seat.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, Boris couldn't come back. Liz Truss, I think we probably...
I like Kemi Badenoch.
Well, I mean, if the Tories start going through another leadership election now, just before the general election, they really are doomed.
It might not be just before. If it's not until the end of the year, I still think that gives them time to get somebody in that those wavering Tory voters who voted Tory for 20, 30, 40 years, who get in our inbox all the time and they say, we can't vote for him.
But divided parties don't win elections, and all that does is make it even more divided than it is now.
But parties that want to win can win elections. And at the moment, if you've got the MPs who are looking at the Tory MPs and going, we cannot win with him in power, because, of course, he also brings with him the shadow and the hangover of lockdowns and of COVID and all of that. You need somebody that wasn't implicated in that period of time to say, I am a new representative for this party. Do you think?
But Tony, don't you think, though, if they were to topple him and bring another leader, the clamour for an election immediately would be overwhelming?
I don't think it would be overwhelming. I think they'd be able to fight it off.
I do.
Rishi's unvotable.
Right.
No, the Conservatives did not vote him in. You know, the membership didn't.
We're just going to have to we're just going to go to Parliament because Jo Hamilton, who of course has a starring role in that TV drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, she is now speaking for the first time. Who she played in the drama?
Monica Dolan is the actress that plays her in the drama. Here she is.
They say, oh, we'll justify that, and it just goes on and on and on.
And you must be in touch with others who are having similar experiences, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, everything has to be backed up with paperwork, and it's just nonsense, you know.
What's the impact on you of having to go through all of that over and over and over again?
Well, I'm pretty much out the other side, but so, you know, I'm fighting for the group that still haven't had. They had virtually nothing. I mean, I'm not privy to what they actually have had, but I've heard, you know, they've had tiny interims, and literally they're in this factory of bureaucracy that just swallows up paperwork.
Mr. Bates, have you had evidence and experience shared with you of what people are going through to try and finally get what they're owed in terms of redress?
Well, I mean, I'm only involved with the GLO group, as in the Group Litigation Order group, the ones who brought the court case against Post Office initially and who got left behind afterwards, realistically, but eventually they're caught up. But, I mean, people have spent a lot of time, again, with their lawyers. Their lawyers have got their case already sorted. In many instances, their cases have been submitted to the department, but they're sat there. They're not moving through. I mean, recently, we were given assurances that after 40 working days, that cases would receive a first offer. Well, generally, I know that most people haven't had first offer. I can speak firsthand about my personal case. I mean, that was submitted towards the beginning of October. I mean, today it will be the 66th working day, and allowing for Christmas and New Year, that I'm still waiting for my first offer. And I'm being told that I won't receive anything or a first offer until the end of this month, which will be 77 working days, or almost double the expected time.
After everything you've been through, after all of this time, the delays are still dragging on.
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of stories about that lawyers are, government lawyers, or the firms that governments are using for lawyers are not happy about working extra hours or working at weekends or working evenings. There obviously isn't enough of a resource being put in at that end to actually deal with these cases. And that's what's really frustrating. I know the lawyers that I'm using, which are doing with a lot of cases, have a huge teamwork, and they're piling the cases through. But they're just not moving. They hit a dead end once they go into the department.
So are you saying that the people who are processing the claim are not busting a gut to actually get the job done?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, after my claim had gone in, and mine's just in the queue like everyone else's, not being dealt with specially at all. But I mean, after mine had gone in, it took them, I think it was 53 days before they asked 3 very simple questions. I mean, it's madness. The whole thing is madness. It's not being driven, and there's no transparency behind it, which is even more frustrating. We do not know what's happening to these cases once they disappear in there.
I mean, I know we like red tape in this country, but I mean, this is insane.
No, it's bogged down. Absolutely bogged down in red tape.
Julie Marston.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome to you both. The ITV drama has undoubtedly provoked a huge response from the public all across the country. Empathy for the incredible, dreadful situation you've been in for such a long time, and outrage on the same thing. One of the things that strikes me, and I think strikes a lot of people, is that postmaster after postmaster were telling the same story. They were in the same position, telling the truth, and were not believed. And in fact, were told that you're the only one. If people have watched that drama and are thinking to themselves with incredulity, how on earth could this happen? What's your assessment, and what would you tell people who watch that? From your experience, how on earth could that have happened? Alan, can I start with you?
How would it happen? I really think it was because of post office. I mean, when you take on a sub-post office, you actually invest a large amount of money in that business. And as happened in my case, when they fell out with me, they walked off with that amount of money. And I think a lot of people feel there's a financial gun held to their head if they start kicking off or start raising too many problems with post office. And cases like mine, cases like Lee's, I mean, these become reasonably high profile in the area, and post office like to push them through, or they used to like to push them through, I don't know if they still do, as examples, as warnings to others to keep your head down and do as you're told.
What about you, Jen?
I was the opposite. They convinced me that it was all my fault, and I wasn't tech savvy at all back 20 years ago. And yeah, they convinced me it was my fault. And that it was before the days of social media, so you felt like I really was alone, and I thought I must have pressed something and reversed something that then doubled the next day. And yeah, I just thought I'd made a hash of it. But when ultimately I went to court and it made the national papers, and people rang me up after seeing the piece in the paper, and I realised it wasn't me, it wasn't just me, then it just makes you so angry that, they literally gaslit me for about 3 years, that, and turned me, well, not into a basket case, but pretty much. And then that lit a fire. And yet, thank goodness we had the publicity because we joined up. But, it's wrong, but it's taken this long and this much money to get to where we are today. And, I know a lot of the group, and they are literally falling apart, waiting for the end of this to be able to put it behind them.
So the turning point is not feeling alone, but actually, I mean, these are we use terms like the post office and Fujitsu, but actually, you're dealing on when you were going through this, still are going through this. You're dealing with individual people. Can you explain how that felt? That you were up against, you were talking to individual people, but you couldn't get through to the big institutions that you're actually dealing with. It's very hard to imagine how that must have been.
Yeah, and a lot of people then went to their MPs because that was Alan's brainchild to go to your MP. I mean, fortunately, I had James, but not all MPs listened, because you kind of think the post office is trusted and they've pleaded guilty in court. So who believes you, I mean, I was lucky James was curious and had some dealings with the Chinook failings. So he got curious because he had 4 people in his constituency. But I think it's the feeling that nobody's listening. When you say you've got a problem, you just need people to listen.
Mm. And do you think, Alan, that your experiences and this process that's still going, being here today and the inquiry, do you think that will help stop miscarriages of justice and repetitions of this kind of scandal?
Are you're talking about broadly on other instances or whatever? In which case, I hope it sends a warning shot across the bows of these big corporations that what they actually do and decide and the way they work really affect people right down at the front line of their organisations. And and I think it's one of the failings there has been with a lot of the other things like the banking scandals or blood scandals. People in jobs of high responsibility, they're not being held to account at the end of the day. And this, I'm hoping, in this particular instance that people are held to account, and that will demonstrate to others you're on the ball with what.
Do you think this experience will help in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's almost like the other way around to what happened to Lee. Hopefully, if people get held to account, it might warn them not to do this to ordinary people again.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just check, Alan, when it comes to Fujitsu, what is their culpability in this, and what is the compensation that you think they owe, frankly, to the British taxpayer and indeed to you?
Well, I think this is very much a question for Sir Win and the inquiry to answer. My gut feel on this, having looked at lots of paperwork over the years, is, how much did Post Office really know in the early days, and how much did government really know in the early days about what was happening at Fujitsu? And I think everyone's going to be surprised about how much was known. But I mean, that's for Sir Win to establish with the inquiry.
Are you comfortable with taxpayers' money being spent on Fujitsu right now?
I don't know what the other options are.
Yeah.
Do we have other IT suppliers, big enough IT suppliers in this country? And I believe they're quite entrenched in an awful lot of defence systems and a whole host of other systems as well. So,
any perspective on that?
Well, I pretty much concur with that, but I guess Sir Win is where it's at. He'll find out who was culpable on the journey, because it goes back so long. He needs to get to the bottom of who knew what when, and then if anything criminal has taken place, that they should face prosecution, and they should share, if it's proved they're culpable, they should have their share of the compensation. They should pay their share.
If I may,
please.
If I may just add something to that, Jen. You're going back 20 odd years when this happened. I should imagine a number of staff would have changed place. There have been big changes in the company. Holding those currently to account for what people did 20 years ago might seem a little stiff. If they can actually show that the organisation has changed, and that it is willing to own up and look after, i.e. compensate or repay government for what's happened in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Joe, you took your case to the Court of Appeal in the end. Did you do that via the Criminal Cases Review Commission?
Yes, eventually. It took a long time.
It took a long time?
Yeah, they waited for Justice Fraser.
What was your experience of the Criminal Cases Review Commission process?
Well, if I'm honest, I applied and I didn't hear anything for years, literally years. And every now and again you get a 3-month letter saying, we're still looking at it. And then it became apparent that they were waiting for the High Court litigation before they'd make up their minds over anything.
It became apparent. Did they tell you that, or did you work that out yourself?
We worked that out. Yeah, we did hear on the grapevine that they wouldn't do anything, as it was so close to the litigation the judgment coming out. They wouldn't do anything until it came out.
When it got to the Court of Appeal, the Post Office in your case conceded that they behaved improperly, and the judgment of the Court of Appeal set out in details what was wrong with the process and why your conviction was unsafe. So.
Mainly because they did it when they knew I hadn't done it.
But you went through that process.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to a piece of legislation that exonerates everybody, including those people who haven't gone through the process that you did? I mean, where does that leave you feeling? Does that diminish your acquittal by the Court of Appeal or not?
I don't think it diminishes mine, but a bit of you thinks, but then something's got to happen because there's 900 cases. It's
Not perfect, do I get the sense? But you're
not perfect, but I think it's the only way.
Ian Lavery.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Mr. Bates and Ms. Hamilton. I wonder the threat of a prison sentence, what sort of impact that actually had on you. Yeah, obviously it must have been horrific. It really must have been horrific. I wonder if you could explain to the committee, you know, when you were actually on the helpline trying to seek advice from the post office and you actually had your computer in front of you and they were explaining how to remedy the issue, and then your deficit well, it doubled, I believe, in front of your eyes. Can you explain to the committee how you actually felt at that precise moment of time?
I mean, at the time I felt helpless. When they told me I was the only one that was having problems, I just presumed it was me because, you know, I didn't know any better. And I always thought they said reverse this and reverse it, and I thought, oh, it'll all sort itself out. But it didn't, and it's, you know, they kept my wages, and then I remortgaged and put money in, and because I had such a long lease on the shop, I knew if they sack, because they said they'll sack me, and then I thought, well, the whole thing will collapse, and I felt I had no choice but to run with it and keep putting money in.
Absolutely desperate situation. And I mean, the reports, and many of them might be exaggerated, I'm not sure, say that you remortgaged, you borrowed money off your parents, etc. What a horrendous situation you find yourself in, and you eventually repaid the money back to the post office. Have you any idea where that money went?
No, I've heard it goes into the suspense account, and then eventually gets hoovered into profit and loss. But
how would you feel, Ms. Hamilton, if you thought that your money was put into the post office accounts and the profits from that account went to dividend holders whilst you were suffering the way you were, and potentially some top executives in the post office received some of your money in terms of bonuses?
Ironic, isn't it?
How would that actually make you feel, honestly?
Yeah, well, it's sickening, really, to be honest. The fact that we were shouting so loud at one point, and everything was known, and yet our money was just being played with, you know, because they looked profitable at one point, and it was our money.
Thanks very much for that. Mr. Bates, last week the government announced a promised upfront payment offer of £75,000. I wonder what your initial reaction is to that, what the reaction is from the people who you've been in contact with, and, you know, will many of them people be taking up the £75,000, or do you believe that, you know, like there'll be a large proportion, or what proportion, in fact, do you believe will accept that, or will you know, march towards full compensation?
I think there probably will be some that it will suit in there, but at the moment, I don't think there's any detail that's been published about it. Well, that was my understanding. And the other question about it is that the few cases that have gone through in the GLO scheme, which I always refer to as the low-hanging fruit, which are the low-value ones. I mean, will they be able to claim a top-up to the £75,000 as well? I mean, I think there's a lot of questions to be answered about the scheme at present, and I don't think, until they publish the details, it's a bit hard to comment.
And basically, the huge question is, can a figure ever be calculated which will fully redress the situation that individuals...
So we're listening to the real Mr. Alan Bates talking to a select committee of MPs with, of course, his starring, the other star of the TV drama, Joe Hamilton. Ian Bates, of course, played by Toby Jones, and she's played by...
Monica Dolan.
And what's shocking about the real Mr. Bates, he first reported issues with the Post Office Horizon in 2000. He had his contract terminated in 2003. He still has not got his compensation. Anyway, 20 years later.
This is Mr. Bates. Let's listen to him.
Issues in the family along with they need to be assessed as part of this scheme, and it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be consistent across the whole board as well, because at present it's not included in a sub-postmaster's claim. I mean, and I think when I've raised this in the past, government have said, oh, well, we do consider it when we're working it out. But it's not structured, it's not transparent, and it needs to be introduced. And as far as the GLO scheme goes, I think it probably affects maybe a fifth or a sixth of all the claimants, maybe more, but it's around that sort of figure. But I mean, you're right. This financial redress will never put things back for people. But this is money. This is something which I get annoyed about when people call it compensation. This is money that they are due. This is money to put them back into a position that they would have been in had Post Office not done what it did to them. So it's not really compensation, which is why I keep calling it financial redress. Sorry.
I think what you're saying basically, just to conclude, a lot of the money in the first place was yours anyway, and you're just getting it back. Is that fair to say?
That's certainly a part of it, but it's also the loss, as has been discussed before, it's the loss of the earnings that they've got. It's the loss of their investment in there. You know, it's all this that they would have had in the future.
You, Chair. One of the recurring themes throughout this has been all of the people that thought that it was only happening to them, and the gaslighting that you referred to happening, Joe. The Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance has obviously done some absolutely extraordinary work in convening those affected, supporting them and seeking justice. But I'm interested to know your view of the role of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters within this, as surely there's alarm bells that should have been going on there, and an expectation from their members that they would get support that didn't materialise. Do you think an independent trade union could have made a difference here? If I could start with you, Alan.
Oh yeah, I mean the Federation were in bed with Post Office from day one, and as far as I know, they probably still are, because they're paid for lock, stock and barrel by Post Office. And it should be entirely independent. It really has to be. I mean, it's utter madness. They've refused to support any sub-postmaster in any legal action against Post Office. In fact, I believe it was it's incorporated into their charter that they were not allowed to act against Post Office, otherwise they'd lose their funding.
Okay. Yeah, well, the only advice I got from them when I rang them up, when I knew they were, I rang them up to arrange an audit. They said, well, we'll arrange the audit. You just go find yourself a good criminal lawyer. And that was the only help I got from them. There was no question of where's the money gone, you know, could it be this, could it be that? They just said, you go find yourself a lawyer. I mean, they knew it was inevitable, you know, why didn't they stick up for me? So yeah, they are in bed with the Post Office, unfortunately. And Justice Fraser's judgment bears that out.
And so do you believe that they share some of the culpability for what's happened?
Yeah, I mean, they had our membership fees.
You to work out that this was a widespread issue.
They must have known. They must have known. But it will come out of the inquiry.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Mr. Lavery has already covered the questions that I wanted to ask, and rightly so, but I just wonder if I could ask you both very briefly. On the 17th of December, Lord Arbuthnot held an adjournment Westminster Hall debate, and then on the 29th of June 2015, Andrew Bridgen held a Westminster Hall debate. Both of them identified that the Horizon scheme could be remotely accessed. Both of them identified the fact there were bugs in the system. And then, according to my timeline, both in 2014, the second site report response from the Post Office maintains remote access to Horizon branch accounts is impossible. Then again in 2017, the Post Office admits in court the previous assertions that remote access to Horizon branch accounts was impossible. How do you respond to that when you were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years calling out the fact that remote access was possible? I'd like to hear how you respond to that, when both the people you were talking to in Parliament, when you were raising it within your groups. I just wonder if you could add some comments to it. Joe, shall we start with you?
Here we are 9 years after that, and it's still not sorted out. I mean, how long have you got? It's shocking that it's taken this long and cost this much money just for something that we've been banging on about for years.
Mr. Bates.
Yeah, I mean, we've always known that we were right. And it was just that the Post Office decided to try and control the whole narrative over the years because of their power and money and all the rest of it. And they had the ear of politicians. They used to brief them, and they used it was very, very hard to battle against them. But we always knew we were right. And there was as we know now, there's a major cover-up been going on. The cover-up's almost as far worse than the actual initial crime and the prosecutions of individuals in all of it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I just want to follow up on Anthony's point just there. Do you think the Post Office was naive and they just believed Fujitsu? Or do you think they were deliberately concealing something? Or was there something else? If I start with you, Alan.
Yeah, I think Post Office didn't have the technical expertise at the outset when they brought this system in. And they very much relied upon their supplier to also be their IT experts and advisors along the way. And I think that was a major decision, a major problem that they did. Realistically, even if they didn't have the in-house expertise, they should have brought in a third party to assist them along the way and not rely on Fujitsu.
And was that your experience whenever you would call the help desk, for example? Was it your experience that the help desk didn't have the capability and the knowledge to assist?
I didn't even know there was a Horizon help desk. That's how helpful the national desk were, and they didn't even tell me. They just said, oh, well, you do this and this and this, which made the whole thing worse. But no one ever told me about the Horizon help desk, because when I took the Post Office over pre-Horizon, and I never had not pre-Horizon, but pre-electronic, and I never had a problem until it went electronic, and I'd only ever dealt with the National Help Desk, but they didn't tell me about the Horizon Help Desk, so...
Incredible. I just follow on from Anthony's question. Are you aware to date, with the Horizon system still being used, of any continuing faults? Has anyone approached either of you at any point to ask whether or not the system that is still being used is resulting in faults?
I mean, I've heard some things that, I have no proof of it, but I've heard it's not brilliant. It's still not brilliant, so...
Thank you, Joe. Alan?
I mean, I've spoken to some postmasters in the past who will give me examples of failings within the system still. So, yes, it's still ongoing.
Thank you.
Nothing else.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bates, Ms Hamilton, may I first of all apologise. I might be one of the only people in the country who's yet to actually watch the ITV drama, not through any deliberate choice, but with having two young children, I'm stuck between Paw Patrol and many other shows in evenings, and normally fall asleep whilst trying to get them to bed.
Thank you for that.
I know. Well,
that's Jonathan Gullis, MP, Conservative
in the Red
MP,
Wall.
In the Red Wall.
Will be struggling, according to that poll the other day, to hold his seat, making an astonishing admission. Hasn't seen the drama.
Yeah.
Which shocked me to my core, and it was following this ITV drama and seeing the injustice that you and many others have had to suffer, and that's why I wonder. So far as you're concerned, do you think, despite what Minister Hollenraker's said on the floor of the House and obviously in subsequent interviews about emergency legislation, about the processing scheme, obviously the drama actually bringing to the public's attention what you've both had to go through as many all the other victims, do you actually truly believe justice will ever be achieved? If I start with you, Miss Hamilton, first.
Well, it'll never let my mum and dad see me have my conviction course, so to me that's what it all looks like. But, apart from that, we need to see deeds, not words. You can say things, but I just think for everybody now to draw a line under this, the very minimum is the group of the GLO group who are still left looking for money. it needs to be fast-tracked. There has to be a way of applying a bit of common sense to this and cutting out all the red tape.
Mr. Bates, sorry.
Yeah, Joe's right, especially the GLO group. Well, I mean, all of them, but I mean, the GLO group, they've been at this, many of us, for 20 years or so. And they've got to put this out. You know, I was talking to one of the group at the weekend. She's 91 years old. How many more years has she got to wait for financial redress? I mean, has she got to wait till she gets a telegram from the king? I just, you know, it's ridiculous how long the system is holding this up. It is absolute madness, and it's very unfair, and it's cruel.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Let me just conclude with a couple of questions that we just need to check. Do you think that there are many victims still out there who haven't yet come forward, Mr. Bates?
There are people contacting me now who have had losses over the years and have disappeared, and I'm sending them on to lawyers these days. But so yes, they are starting to come through again.
I had a text in the taxi on the way over from Good Morning Britain this morning from someone who'd been to prison. And so I'm going to pass her on to Neil. I said, give me a chance, I'll get out of this and I'll get back to you. And so I think there are people out there.
And we've heard that some people who have taken financial redress didn't get legal advice when they put their claims in and may therefore have been shortchanged. Is that your view too, Joe?
Yeah, well, for sure it will be. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Bates, is that your perception?
Yes, yeah, I think so.
And so finally, what are the key tests for the legislation, Mr. Bates? What do you think this legislation that the government has now promised must achieve?
I'm sorry, which part of the legislation?
This is Liam Byrne, the chairman of the committee. He's a former Labour minister. He famously was the one who left a note for his successor in the coalition saying, sorry, all the money's run out. He was Chief Secretary of Treasury. But he's chaired a pretty lively exchange with our two heroes of the post office hour.
How would you judge it, whether it's good enough?
Well, I suppose really if it draws many more people out of the woodwork, and that should come forward.
Do you know what would be ironic is if those people that just come forward would get their money before the group that fought for this.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much indeed for your evidence today. After everything that you've been through, we are truly grateful for the evidence that you've given. You've told us that the process of redress is like being tried all over again.
You feel like you're the guilty one. You know, why should you, I've not claimed for anything I'm not entitled to. I'm not lying about anything, but you have to back it all up with everything. It's like, wow. They've got my tax returns. They can see, what's so difficult.
Yeah. You've then gone on to tell us that you don't think, frankly, the bureaucracy is working hard enough to speed up justice and redress. You've said something that has got to happen. You've welcomed the idea of legislation. But you've also warned us that there are no details that have been published. There's no details about this £75,000 idea, and crucially, there's no transparency about it either.
No.
So those are big questions that we need to put to the Minister when we see him a little bit later on. But for now, thank you. That brings this session to a conclusion. Thank you so much for your evidence. Order.
So that was Liam Byrne there, who's the chairman of the committee, former Labour MP. We've got Simon.
Still an MP, former minister.
Sorry, former minister, still a Labour MP. Thank you. We've got Simon Danchuk here, who is a former Labour MP. So much to get through there, Simon. I think what really struck me, and I don't know about both of you, is the nice nature of Joanne Hamilton. Even now, she was able to have that lovely, kind character taken advantage of. There's still no anger really emanating from her. She's just still saying, well, it would be ironic if the people who made claims now got their money before we have, and she's at pains to make it clear that it isn't necessarily about the money for her.
Yeah, she accepted a criminal record. She admitted to false accounting to £36,000 because she feared she was going to prison.
Yeah.
And yet she's calm.
Yeah. Joe Hamilton, Alan Bates there, I mean, the best of British, patient, calm, remaining positive. considering what they've been through, quite incredible, really. And yet there's so many other people need to be held accountable. And for viewers and listeners' benefit, that's a select committee which scrutinises government. There are a number of select committees in Parliament. They meet on a regular basis on different topics, and this one's looking at this scandal.
It's one of the things. It's one of the things that our democracy does really, really well. Those select committees, aren't they? They're often gripping in a way that you don't get within the House of Commons. The other thing that struck me is that they are both pinning their hopes on the inquiry. And even when Jo was asked, do you think that Fujitsu should pay some of these costs? And she said, well, if it's proved that they are culpable, they should pay their share. I mean, if that was me, I'd be banging my fists on the table and saying yes. But hang on, but is she naive to think that that inquiry will find the result that she wants?
Well, I
hope so.
I think it may do, but I think the reason she's so cautious, look, she's had to fight really expensive lawyers hired by the post office, so she has to be careful everything they say because they will come after her.
Yeah.
That's the trouble. They've been intimidated, these people, by really expensive lawyers, paid for by us, the taxpayer, because the post office is still state-owned.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. This is probably one of the biggest scandals that Britain's faced in quite a long time.
Certainly in our lifetime.
Absolutely. And the problem in Britain as well, though, is that many of the inquiries that take place take a considerable amount of time and then never reach any significant conclusion. So I would worry about that. One point to note is that this select committee, the part that I enjoyed most about being a member of Parliament was select committee work, because you can really drill down into the detail as they were doing. I understand the minister responsible, I think it's Kevin Ollerin.
He's done very well, actually.
Yes, he has. And he was sat in the audience listening to all the evidence that was being given, which is very unusual. So it shows you how seriously the government are taking it. And finally, I think we will see some action and some justice for those people.
I don't share you.
I think it will. I think the clamour from the public, the rage, the anger is such, it's palpable.
I don't share your optimism, fellas, I'm sorry.
People were subjected to unfair prosecutions on the basis of a lie. People are fed up with the fact that it's the taxpayer bailing out the compensation. Oi, Fujitsu worth 160 billion, cough up.
Yeah.
But we need to know who lied. Yeah. Who put those men and women in court on the basis of a lie? We need to know who it is, and they need to be prosecuted. We're being told now Fujitsu are actually speaking at this public inquiry, which has been running since 2020.
And state as you might be read. I am personally appalled.
Of course you are.
By the evidence that I have seen and what I have saw on the television drama and the statements I've seen from the victims to the inquiry. So we did not stand up to that in those periods of time.
And do you accept that Fujitsu evidence was used to put innocent people in prison?
Yes, there was evidence from us. We did have we were supporting rather the post office in their prosecutions. There was data given from us to them to support those prosecutions, so yes.
Do you accept that before 2010, your staff knew that there were problems with the Horizon system?
The information that was shared with the post office as part of our contract with them was very clear. So the post office also knew there were bugs and errors. They also
just to zero in on this, did staff in your organisation before 2010 know that there were problems with the Horizon system?
So I believe that
simple yes or no?
Well, I don't personally know, Chair. I think the inquiry is looking at that very point that you.
What's your gut feel?
My gut feel would be yes.
Okay. So you've said that you're an ethical company. You've said that your evidence was used to put innocent people in prison. You've said that staff in your organisation knew that there were problems with the system. Can you tell us how much you now think your company should contribute to the compensation bill?
The inquiry is dealing with some very complex matters over...
But is there a moral obligation, Mr. Patterson, for you to contribute?
I think there is a moral obligation for the company to contribute, and I think the right place to determine that is when our responsibility is very clear. There are many parties involved in this travesty.
But I've just read your last set of accounts which have been published. You've not made any provision in those accounts for a contribution to the compensation, but you're telling the committee today that you believe there is at least a moral obligation for Fujitsu to contribute.
When the inquiry finishes...
That's a simple yes or no.
Well, so
is there a moral obligation for Fujitsu
I've already
to
answered...
It's okay, you can keep going.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I believe there is a moral obligation, and I've already said that. I think it's also important that the inquiry deals with these very complex matters with all the parties involved. Yes, we have a part to play. Yes, the Post Office. Already this morning we've talked about lawyers, we've talked about the law. I think
you're listening here. This is the head of Europe at Fujitsu. His name is Paul Patterson, answering questions at the Post Office Scandal Select Committee.
We have a part to play and to contribute to the redress, I think is the words that Mr Bates used, the redress fund for the sub-postmasters.
Thank you very much. Mr Lavery.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Patterson, do you accept that the existence of a Fujitsu covert unit, as shown on the ITV documentary, actually existed, whereby members of your team were able to access sub-postmasters' computer systems in their own offices and were able to change data without sub-postmasters knowing that that had been done?
I don't recognise the term covert. I wasn't there.
Did it happen? Was that happening?
So we have already stated that there was remote access to these systems. What took place or did not take place in those interventions is certainly, I know, one of the streams of work that the inquiry are looking at as well. But there was remote access.
I mean, covert means in many ways secretly. If you've got people in your offices or wherever accessing remotely the sub-postmasters' accounts and altering them, that's covert, isn't it?
So
without the sub-postmasters having any idea whatsoever of that happening, in fact, it would border on, I'm not a solicitor, but certainly would border being on illegal in my view.
The support and the interventions from remotely from Fujitsu has been documented, and it is clear. The Post Office was certainly aware of that remote access, and that was clear for some period of time.
The Post Office denied that, didn't it?
I believe they did.
So the Post Office weren't telling the truth at the time. Is that
your
understanding?
So I only know what I know, and I know that certainly as part of that process, the remote access was documented and communicated.
What would you say to that, Mr Reid, that the Post Office were very much aware but denied it?
I've only been in the organisation since 2019, so it's difficult for me to comment. I think the most...
You've got to comment on the Post Office. You're in charge of the Post Office.
I think the most important place for the commentary is going to be Sir Wyn Williams's inquiry. We are obviously cooperating with him wholeheartedly to make sure that all information that we have and that we are aware of is supplied to that inquiry. And clearly there will be individuals from the Post Office who will be providing witness statements and who will be coming forward to give insight into that.
I mean, there's whistleblowers have come forward and
So this is MP Ian Lavery, and the gentleman we just saw talking then is the lawyer for Fujitsu.
Why did Fujitsu or the Post Office just sit back and take absolutely no notice of the sub-postmasters, rather than listen to them and try and help them and get the issues resolved amicably? Basically took the attitude that you're just going to prosecute these people, and basically they were feared for their livelihoods. Some actually committed suicide as a result of the Post Office policy. Why was this the case?
Well, as I say, I can't answer specifically for what was happening pre-2015. I simply wasn't in the business at the time. What I can empathise with is that I've spent a lot of this last year speaking individually to postmasters who are victims of scandal. I've had private meetings with over 30 of those, and a number of them have certainly talked to me about the trauma associated with this, the way that they were treated and handled. And I think that is something that has come through in the human evidence that has been displayed at the inquiry, and also that has come through very, very clearly in the way that they were treated. And clearly, from our perspective, we want to make sure that we as an organisation are giving Sir Win every single opportunity that he has to make sure that he can get to the truth. And that is clearly what the...
We would expect nothing less.
Absolutely agree with you, Chair. That is exactly what we need to do. We know it's an extremely complex situation. It's been going on for 25 years. There's an enormous amount of documentation and data, but we want to make sure that we give him every opportunity to understand what exactly happened, who was accountable, and indeed what we do next.
What happened to Joe Hamilton and others, monies who they repaid? What happened to that?
Well, I've obviously become aware as a consequence of the evidence that's been provided that there is an on-running issue associated with suspense accounts. We've had this investigated 2 or 3 times by external agencies. We've provided that data to Sir Win. He can obviously draw his conclusions specifically. I don't think we, as I understand it, we got to the bottom and the nub of what was going on with those suspense accounts. Lord Arbuthnot spoke to me about this when I first joined the organisation in 2020, and it's something that we've struggled to uncover because the quality of the data isn't good enough, going back over 10 years, to be honest. But it is, as I say, something that we've spoken to our auditors about. It's something that we had external third-party look at, certainly prior to my time, and it's something that Second Sight obviously called out. So we have provided that information to Sir Win. He will be able to draw his conclusions, given all the evidence that he is gathering, and we will, as I say, get to the bottom of exactly what happened. And this is obviously pre-2015.
Is it a possibility that the monies that the Sir Postmaster paid ended up in the coffers of the post office, and then as part of the profits the monies were then paid to dividend holders, and indeed could have been part of hefty remuneration packages for the post office executive?
It's difficult to say. I mean, as I say, this is pre-2015. I don't have the context of what the...
But is it possible?
It's possible. Of course it's possible. Absolutely, it's possible.
Mr. Patterson, why at the time, you knew that there was glitches in the system? Why did you sit back and do absolutely nothing about it?
I don't know. I really don't know. And on a personal level, I wish I did know. Following my appointment in 2019, I've looked back on those situations for the company and the evidence I've seen, and I just don't know. What I do know is the inquiry is looking at this very point of who knew what and when, and what action they did or did not take to draw attention to the concerns. I just don't know.
After reading in, I think it was 2015, the Post Office executive, Paula Venables, told the committee that she believed that the prosecutions were sound. I mean, things have changed dramatically, obviously. Do you think the Post Office attempted to mislead Parliament and the public to cover up its own failings?
I can't specifically comment on that. I think what's become very evident, clearly, is that we've got a number of cases that have come to light. We've seen 2,500 colleagues come forward in the Horizon shortfall scheme. We've seen a number of overturned convictions. Clearly, Sir Win will be looking very carefully at what has happened. And I think we're all very keen to get to the bottom of this. I've been very, very clear since I joined the organisation that the Post Office simply can't move forward until such time as proper redress has been determined and, has, more importantly, has been paid out and given to those victims of this scandal. We know that. And certainly from our perspective, we will provide everything we can to Sir Win so that he can make these pronouncements. I know it's a frustration for the committee that, you know, certainly in my instance, I wasn't in the organisation and you would like specific answers. It's very difficult to do that. But
well, we would expect you to know the history given your full cooperation with the inquiry, Mr. Reid.
Well, absolutely, and that is exactly what we're doing. We are providing all and full cooperation with the inquiry, and that's clearly the right place for us to apportion blame when Sir Wyn has made his pronouncements. That's very, very clear, and we want to make sure that he does that and does that well.
Chair, can I just say, I've asked 3 or 4 questions. I haven't had one answer yet. And the reality is you've got the head of the post office, head of Fujitsu, that department, and the answers have been absolutely negative. You know, if we bring in people in front of the committee, we would expect them at least to have a knowledge of the history of what's happened. Something as big as this, and the answers have been, well, I haven't had any answers to the questions which I've asked, and I'm not frustrated, I'm absolutely appalled at the answers which I've received. Thanks.
Mr. Gullis, briefly.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Patterson.
So, Ian, Simon Danchuk from Labour is still with us. That was a jaw-dropping answer from Paul Patterson, the head of Fujitsu, when asked, you knew there were glitches in the system, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you raise anything? Now, OK, he's only been with Fujitsu since 2019. He said, I don't know, and he said it twice. What a shocking answer.
Yeah, and that's the beauty.
That's the best you can come up with.
That's the beauty of select committees. You've got Ian Lavery there, a member of Parliament, asking, you knew about the glitches, why didn't you say something about it at the time? Fujitsu, you were there. And this guy, Patterson, has turned up from Fujitsu and deliberately says, I don't know.
But what's so shocking is...
You wouldn't come and give evidence not being prepared to answer this crucial question.
He's had weeks to prepare.
Absolutely. Even if he wasn't working there at the time, he has to sit in front of that committee.
He's the boss.
He has to sit in front of the British public and he has to come up with an answer for the people. You've got Joanne Hamilton sat behind him. Did you see her face? I mean, she's the victim in this. That was just the most brilliant framing of that image.
You've got a criminal record and it took her years and years to get a pardon. That is not acceptable an answer, is it?
And that's why I have no faith about the inquiry.
No, I understand, and that's what he passed it to. He said it's for the inquiry to decide, just moving it on, avoiding giving a decent answer to the real question, the crux of this. The other big question is, and I've yet to see it asked at this select committee, is why did you think so many people decided to turn to, so many post office masters decided to turn to crime all at once? It's an absolute nonsense.
All the same offence.
Yeah.
And we heard a figure, 2,400 people now are complaining. I mean, we thought it was 5. The number just keeps going up, Simon.
Yes, absolutely, and it will do. So some people might not even know that they were victims. They might have deliberately not understood what was going on and what was happening to them.
Yeah, and Jo Hamilton said, didn't she, she got a text on her way to the Select Committee this morning. She is one of the postmistresses who accepted a criminal record.
In the back of the shop there with the blonde hair.
In the back there, because she thought she might go to prison otherwise, from someone who went to prison who hasn't come forward yet, but now will. Because these people must be in a state of shock.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Select Committee has to hold these people to account, and the head of Fujitsu there is going to have real questions to answer.
There's a big issue here, Simon, and I think this is why it gets so many of the British public incensed, because there is this feeling that you have a big corporation, a big tech company like Fujitsu, and the word that Alan Bates kept using is his lack of transparency. There's still a lack of transparency. Any of us have even just been on hold to a helpline when you're trying to sort out your utility bill or whatever it is. We all feel this sense that there is this sort of behemoth of a corporation and the little man on the ground, the little man and woman that just want to run their small business or live their lives have no power. It's a powerlessness, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it can't just be apologies. It has to be things like substantial compensation from Fujitsu. It has to be people losing their honours, whether it's Ed Davey losing his honour and stepping down as leader of the Liberal Democrats, because what his role in this is substantial. The honour that's been lost from the woman that was running the post office. The result of all this has to be substantial for the public and the victims to be satisfied.
Absolutely.
OK, right, thank you, Simon. We will let our boiling blood cool down a little and we'll get a reaction from Tonya and Nigel after this quick break for the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi, it's Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. For many, it is going to be a fine, sunny but cold day. However, across northern areas, we have already seen some significant snow. We've had a feature pushing its way in from the northwest, crossing parts of Northern Ireland into Scotland and northern England, and it's this that's brought some heavy snow already today and will continue to do so for a time as we go into the afternoon, albeit turning to rain as we go later on. However, another feature pushing into northwestern Scotland is likely to bring some more significant snow here, so we could see some disruption. Further south, across many parts of England and Wales, lots of dry, sunny weather, and although it is going to be cold, with temperatures only a few degrees above freezing, the cold feel will be offset by the light winds and winter sunshine. Through this evening and overnight, the outbreaks of rain, sleet or snow pushing their way eastwards and also a bit further south too, so some parts of North Wales into the Midlands likely to see some wintry outbreaks. Further north, turning drier for most, clearer skies allowing for a harsh frost and some icy patches with temperatures dropping into negative double figures. Some further snow showers towards the far north and staying dry towards the far south. Through Wednesday, and whilst for many it is going to be a mostly dry day, we do still have some snow showers pushing in on a brisk north-northwesterly wind, so mostly affecting northern and western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, and the system that could have brought some disruptive snow to southern areas now looks like it will stay to the south of us, so it is looking mostly dry, sunny but cold. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, we are back in the studio. We are discussing what we've just been watching here. We are kind of blindsided by it. We've got Nigel Nelson and Tonya Buxton here in the studio with us to react to that select committee there about the post office. Tonya, let me come to you first. What we were taking from it is this sense of these little people, and I don't mean that pejoratively, I mean normal people, ordinary people, good-natured people, being absolutely trod upon by a massive corporation in collaboration with the post office, and they're still not getting justice. They're still not getting answers on a day like today.
If I was there and Paul Patterson turned around and said, you know, I don't know as an answer.
When asked why there
were glitches.
Oh,
I don't know, I wasn't there. No, it's not good enough. I would have smacked him around the head and said, not good enough, not good enough, absolutely not good enough.
He said it twice.
He said it twice. He has no shame. We were discussing earlier. I wonder how much money this man is on to turn around.
We won't know because it's a private company, but I suspect a multi-million-pound salary package.
He's head of Europe.
And I'm going to put myself out there. In my opinion, they all knew what was going on. They were all throwing your common kind of postmasters under the bus to get away with it, to hide it. I don't believe that the post office didn't know exactly what was going on. So suddenly, all of these people have turned to crime, all at the same time. Please, it's a cover-up, and somebody needs to go to jail. Somebody needs to do the time that those poor postmasters did. Somebody else needs to take responsibility.
Do you think people did know, or were there just a lot of useful idiots? Because often in a situation like this, Nigel, that some people will know, but it just takes a lot of people to not ask the right questions for something like this to just get swept along.
That's how they get away with it.
That's true, Bev. But in this particular case, here is a guy with a very senior position at Fujitsu. He is going to a select committee, which you would imagine he would prepare for. And if he didn't know the answers to the questions he almost was certain to be asked, why not go and find out? But the idea of being able to say to a group of MPs, and this is actually a semi-judicial inquiry, select committees, to be able to turn and say to MPs, I don't know, as Tonya just said, it's not good enough, but it's an astonishing response.
And we know too, don't we, from Kevin Jones, the Labour MP from Durham North, that the first glitches in this wretched Horizon IT system were identified in the pilot back in 1996. Here he is in 2019, so 2023, I don't know why we didn't raise the problem.
That's right. And
I don't know.
There are no clean hands on this.
No.
This begins during the Blair government. So as Horizon was introduced at the end of the 90s, it was known that things weren't going right. Sub-postmasters were discovering problems. The post office should at least have thought, hang on, they can't all be crooks. I mean, suddenly these people are coming forward. What is going on here? There is, at the very least, a lack of curiosity to find out what was happening, but then to persecute them after that is absolutely astonishing.
I think also what struck me, Tonya, is when they're talking about compensation, these are such good people, the likes of Mr Bates and Joanne Hamilton. They're even now at pains, having 13 years of this stress, they're even now at pains to say that it's not about the money. They don't want to appear greedy, even at this stage. And Mr. Bates was saying the compensation we're talking about isn't to put these people in a position anything other than what they were before.
Yes.
Because they lost their earnings. They paid their own money to plug the system.
Yeah.
They lost their investments in their buildings, their houses. I would just write them a massive cheque. I think they each deserve well over £1 million quid.
Alan Bates invested
From
£65,000 in his business, which they took the licence away from him. They shut him down, and then, of course, he lost the earnings for years, and he lost his reputation because he was a key figure in the local community, and suddenly he's a pariah because he's been nicking local people's money.
What I'm seeing when I look at Alan Bates and Joe Hamilton is that they are the type of people of the post office of my childhood.
Yeah.
And what the post office have done now is that they've ruined that. No one's going to want to go into that. So it's more than just the money that they're owed. I think they should get huge amounts of compensation.
I agree.
Absolutely huge amounts of compensation. And it should be backdated. The people in the post office that were getting big bonuses for doing great jobs and all of this, they need to start paying back some of their incompetence
And remember,
money.
Tonya, Paula Vernell, the chief executive, she got her bonuses.
She paid those back?
Not a penny.
No, that has to be given back. For what?
And he was unable to answer the point from Ian Lavery, the boss of the post office, were some of the bonuses that executives got based on the fact all these postmasters were paying potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds back into the business, which was their money.
Well, I mean,
so those bonuses could have been.
In a sense, the ITV drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, that was the central question.
Yeah.
Where did that money go?
We really don't know.
If the sub-postmaster didn't take it, it obviously got back into the post office coffers because they squeezed them to get all that money back. Where is it? Where did it go toward? Did it go to their profits? Did it go to their dividends? We don't know.
Yeah. The other thing, the question I thought was interesting was from Charlotte Nichols MP. She's for Warrington North, Labour MP, and she asked whether there should have been more of a role for the union here, the post office union. And Joanne Hamilton said that they refused to support any postmaster and were, in fact, in bed with the post office itself.
Unusual, that, isn't it?
Well,
it does raise the interesting question, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That often don't support the people that they're supposed to be supporting. They support the agenda.
They should be looking after the workers.
I mean, that came out in the drama.
It did.
The fact that it was that one union rep who then, if you like, broke ranks with the union to try and help the sub-postmasters. And yes, the union should have got involved. But at this stage, we were dealing with the private prosecutions the post office were launching, which wouldn't be a union matter because they decided to go to law. I mean, in normal circumstances, if people were being reasonable, and the post office clearly weren't, the union would have been involved in that negotiation and representing their members. But they couldn't do that if their members were being taken to court.
It just still feels like they were let down. Yet again.
Let down by everybody, by absolutely everybody.
The union let down. The post office ministers, one after another, starting off with Ed Davis, let them down.
Yes.
Nobody was listening to these people who were just saying, it's not us. It isn't us.
Have you seen the drama, Tonya? Have you watched
seen the
drama?
No, I've just been following it in the news.
There's this interesting scene where they all get together, the accused and the wronged, in a town hall, actually. And Mr. Bates brings them all together, and then there's more of them, and dozens, and they start coming in, It's a really moving moment, actually. It kind of gives you goosebumps of how many there were and how they found each other. And what struck me was how they were unable to find each other before that physical meeting. And it made me think about social media, actually, and how we give social media a really hard time. But if this was to happen today,
that's right.
those people would have found themselves. They would have done a hashtag post office scandal, and they would have found each other.
Well, I mean, the other problem there was the post were picking them off individually by saying to them, look, you're the only person who's actually been affected by this. Nobody else has got it. We don't know what's going on, but we're going to have a look into it.
Outright lies.
It was a lie. So in fact, when they got together, and I think there was, as you say, one of the most moving moments in it when people then suddenly turned up, more and more people.
They knew they weren't alone.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. When some of them were getting their compensation letters from the post office, they were marking it... I forgot what the legal expression was, but the expression meant they could not share their offers with their fellow colleagues in this dispute, and they needed to, and it was it was the most of them were unrepresented legally in the first place, so they were squashing them again. The post office, even when they were offering them money, they were told legally
it had to be
they couldn't share it with anyone.
Yeah, it's like a non-disclosure.
It was basically that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Again, bullying them. Again.
But somebody makes these rules. Somebody writes these letters.
Yeah.
Somebody decides that's the language that's going into them, and that somebody needs to be reprimanded. They need somebody from on high. Someone from the post office needs to go to jail.
The phrase that I heard as well that came out from that was this lack of accountability. It was Joanne Hamilton who said there's this lack of accountability, and it made me think about the Us for Them book, the accountability deficit they've called it. And it does seem something very particular for our time, doesn't it, Nigel? That in these times of huge companies and everything done online, we can pass the buck too easily. People can hide, they can get through nets. Why are we not good at holding people accountable anymore, whether it's an MP or a CEO of a big company?
I think it was Adam Bates who actually made the point that this is actually a matter for the inquiry, the one that's led by Wyn Williams, which should, all being well, report before the end of the year. I think that's what they're talking about.
3 years already.
Yeah, but the point here is that at the moment we're getting a bit knee-jerk about sort of because everyone is so angry.
I'm okay with knee-jerk under these
we're on a witch hunt.
Yeah, but it's not a knee-jerk for the people involved.
No, it's not. But the whole point is we've got to find out who is culpable. It may well be Tonya's right. Somebody should go to jail at the end of it. But let's find out who that person is.
That's a good point.
And that must be done through the public inquiry.
I don't necessarily share your options. Anyway, it's been really interesting. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Thank you, Tonya. Thank you, Nigel. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Emily and Tom.
We'll see you tomorrow.
The bosses of the Post Office have been before the inquiry over that Horizon scandal. And guess what? Those Fujitsu bosses have admitted they didn't know what was going on.
Yes, and we'll also be crossing live to Parliament for...
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinions.